Thursday was the day that we had the Locked On Podcast mock draft. How did your boy do? Did I get up to number 2? Well, you'll find out that plus a whole lot more on Friday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for March 22nd, 2024.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. To get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available, as always, checking us out on YouTube. We appreciate that in a major way. The show continues to grow each and every day. That's because of you, Raider Nation, and of course because of my man Ari. Without Ari, there is no Locked On Raider podcast on YouTube, so we definitely appreciate him. Check him out on Twitter at Ari Producers. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And you know, you want to chime in on the show, the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Normally we have the show up before we do right now, right? It's a little bit later than it normally would be. Usually it's right around midnight. I like to get the show up, but I was at an event on Thursday at the Raiders facility, a little alumni event that I really wasn't sure what it was going to be about, but I know that they invited me. They wanted me to host it, and I knew it was going to be a little bit of a Q&A. So when I got there, I found out that Akbar Baja Bijamila, he was going to be the guy that I was going to go back and forth, have a little Q&A with, and I'm telling you right now, he was fantastic. Right. I mean, really, they didn't need me. He did all the heavy lifting. Right. I was just I was there as a compliment. Right. I was like, he was the steak. I was the side dish. I was the mac and cheese. Right. I was just the side dish, or steak and potatoes. I was the potatoes. I didn't have to do the heavy lifting. He's fantastic. He played with the Raiders for a year from 2003, 2004, and then ended his career with the Raiders as well. But, you know, just a guy that's very, successful. He's got the American Ninja Warrior show. He's been on many different shows. He's just really successful at what he does. I was able to share a lot of stories, and I thought we had a really good time. I was hoping that the event was going to be recorded so I could bring it to the show and you can actually hear it. I think you'd really enjoy it. But let me tell you, it was a lot of fun. Had a little bit of dinner afterwards, so that is the reason for the show getting up a little bit later than normal. So with that being said, do want to let you know what's coming up on the show. Of course, in segment number 3, we have your calls and texts right off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. We'll try to get as many in as possible as we close out the week really strong. A lot of good conversations to talk about. We've got the quarterback conversation, the draft conversation, the Raiders in general, what they need to do. A lot of different conversations that we have coming up in segment number 3. Segment number 2, it was the day that I had to do the mock draft. I had to do the decision making, had to figure out exactly what I was going to do, how I was going to navigate my way up to number 2 so the Raiders can get their quarterback, obviously that being Jaden Daniels. So I'll tell you how it all shook out, how it went down, and what ended up happening with the mock draft that we did on the Locked On Podcast Network, and we do it each and every year. So for anyone who's been listening to the show for a long time, you kind of know how it goes down. Here in segment number 1, just kind of news and notes, nothing earth-shattering, just a couple nuggets that I wanted to bring to the table, and I'll get right into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So let's go ahead and get started. Want to kind of close out the week with a little, like I said, news and notes. Tyler Hall, cornerback Tyler Hall, remember number 37, the guy that I said multiple times, like, man, who's that 37 out there, man? He's playing really well. Tyler Hall, he played in the slot quite a bit. He signed with the Eagles earlier in the week. So he is gone, and that's another free agent that the Raiders have lost. And if you think about it, it's not every single year when the Raiders lose a lot of free agents where they're signed by other teams early in free agency. Josh Jacobs went to the Packers, Bilal Nichols to the Cardinals, Jermaine Illuminor to the Giants, Austin Hooper to the Patriots, Brandon Parker to the 49ers, Tyler Hall to the Eagles, and Amik Robertson to the Lions. And they've only signed 4 so far: Christian Wilkins, Gardner Minshew, Harrison Bryant, and then Alexander Madison. So only 4 signed and 7 lost. So right now, people ask about the compensatory picks. They're in position to basically get 2 compensatory picks in 2025. Christian Wilkins obviously was a big-time signing because of the big-time the money that was given up, the contract that was given up, and he was a tier 1 free agent pickup by the Silver and Black. But right now, they're in position to pick up two compensatory picks because of the free agency, the little mathematical piece that they put together as they're trying to figure out all the compensatory picks throughout the rest of the league. Also, with the addition of Alexander Mattison, the running back, he's actually going to use and wear number 25, and that was Trayvon Merrick's number. So this is also something that was brought up a little bit earlier this week. Trayvon Merrick is now going to be number 7. Alexander Mattison will be rocking number 25. Again, nothing earth-shattering. Just want to kind of go ahead and pass that news along to you. And finally here, in segment number 1, I want you to hear a few sound bites from GM Tom Telesco. He was on with JT the Brick and Eric Allen. They were broadcasting live from Raiders HQ on Thursday, and of course that was on Raider Nation Radio 920. But I wanted to take you inside the mind of GM Tom Telesco. We don't get a chance to talk to him very often. It was great that JT got about 12 to 15 minutes with him. So I just wanted to bring a couple sound bites. You want to hear the whole interview, you can go to lvsportsnetwork.com. It's all right there. But the first one is Tom Telesco talking about the process of landing that big fella, Christian Wilkins from Miami. Here's Tom Telesco talking about that.
Yeah, as far as the contract, that went pretty quickly, but the process really started from the day that I walked in the door, working with the pro staff and Dwayne Joseph on not just that position, but all positions as far as how we're going to look at free agency, who's available, who fits us the best, how that works in our salary cap, work with Tom Delaney on that, as far as how it kind of all fits into the big picture. We saw Christian as a really unique opportunity because players like him usually don't become available in free agency. As far as a player in the prime of his career, has been healthy and durable throughout his career, which we're going to hopefully continue. That's continued to happen. Great makeup and character, and really has played at a high level for 4 years. This wasn't like a 1-year contract guy. So, and he plays a position that's a premier position. It's hard to find. It's hard to find big people who have really great movement skills, explosiveness, can play the run and the pass. And what we've seen now, if you want to win your division in any division, you need to have a deep and talented defensive line. So he's going to add to that group. Really excited to get that done.
So there's Tom Telesco right there talking about the process of landing Christian Wilkins and how big of a priority that was, not when free agency opened up, but from the minute that he walked in the building, the minute that he got the job as the GM. I thought that was a pretty, that was pretty telling that was already a priority. That was something that Antonio Pierce had been paying attention to. Obviously, the rest of the staff have been paying attention to, and they really wanted to get their guy, and they focused in on getting their guy. The other free agent that they picked up really quickly was Gardner Minshew. And of course, he's got a 2-year deal worth up to $25 million, but $15 million is guaranteed, and that's kind of what I focused in on. So here's Tom Telesco just talking about the importance of signing Gardner Minshew as quickly as they did.
Yeah, you had to move quick. And I think part of it, too, if you looked at last year, how many quarterbacks went down with injuries, and it kind of just reminds you, you need more than one quarterback. You need at least two. And I think a lot of teams see the same thing as far as investing in this position, not just with your starter. So a chance to add Gardner to the mix, have him come in and compete with Aiden. Gardner, when he's had the chance to play, he's gone in and produced. He plays with a certain moxie to him. Yeah. I mean, he's certainly a guy when you watch play, he to me just screams Raider. Yeah. As far as how he plays the game, his passion for it. But we're excited to add him in the room. I think it'll even help Aiden because Gardner's been around a little bit, plays some different offenses, a little bit more of a veteran presence, so we're excited to have him.
So I think with the signing of Gardner Minshew, it allows the Raiders to be flexible. They don't have to get desperate, like going into a car dealership and knowing that your car is about to die, so you got to go buy a car. Instead, it's like, no, my car is good. I just want a better car. It gives them a little bit of flexibility, similar to what Jimmy G did as the Raiders went into the draft last season, and we know it didn't really work out the way it was supposed to then, right? I mean, Jimmy G gave him a veteran presence, thought okay, you go and get the quarterback of the future, you're good to go, and if you don't, well, at least you have a veteran that can hold it down. Well, Jimmy G wasn't able to hold him down. Aiden O'Connell ended up getting, stepped right into action and started more games than he was expected to start his rookie year. So there's Tom Telesco just talking about Gardner Minshew. The final soundbite I want you to hear, and again, I encourage you to go to lvsportsnetwork.com under JT the Brick and just pull up the interview. It's really good. It's about 12 to 15 minutes. Here's Tom Telesco just talking about the state of the offensive line, something that I definitely believe needs to be addressed, especially the right side of it. But here's Telesco on the O-line.
It's still a work in progress. And we re-signed Andre James, which I think was really important. Having a center with some experience and some feel, especially when you have a young quarterback behind you, it's a big part of it. And I think he's going to fit the scheme we're going to run really well. And I've watched Andre from the outside looking in for a while. He's always been a really solid center. You got to have a good center in this league to play. So, and then I even think this scheme with Dylan Parham is really going to accentuate what he does well as far as reaching and running and getting people. But it's still a work in progress. I know last year, run game wise, with offensive line, tight ends, backs, and receivers you have to block. We were in the bottom 5 in rushing last year. Pick whatever metric you want. So that has to improve. That will come from the whole group. We're still getting that group together. What I've seen of Thayer Munford is really interesting. I think he's a really interesting player. Whether it's a tackle or guard.
Right.
So he'll be in the mix there. And then, obviously having Colton Miller back healthy, which he will be, is a big part of it. He's a big-time left tackle.
So there you go. Tom Telesco talking about the offensive line. Thought that was interesting that Thayer Munford could be a guy that could compete at the guard position, could compete at the tackle position, right? He said it's a work in progress, talked about their run blocking, talked about what he saw on film from last year. He's been very critical of the offensive line, and so that's something to think about as the draft process goes along. That could be an area that the Raiders attack at pick number 13 if they stay there, if they're not able to move up to number 2 and go get their quarterback. And obviously they definitely want to go up to number 2 and get their quarterback. And I know for a matter of fact that it's not going to be from lack of effort if they don't get them, right? I do know that there is at least some interest from the Raiders to try to get up to the number 2 spot. I don't know how heavily they're going to pursue that and try to make that trade with Washington, but I do know that there are at least some exploratory conversations going on. Let's put it like that. That's the best way I could put it, and not put too much gas on it. I don't want to do that. So there you go. That's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, news and notes of the day. Coming up in segment number 2, how about that effort to go from 13 to 2? I had the task of doing that. I talked about it on Thursday's show. I put out an offer already on Thursday, and they told me that no, we'll go back and we'll think about it a little bit later. So what ultimately happened when the mock draft was actually going on the Locked On Podcast Network? Well, we'll talk about that coming up in segment number 2. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about one of our great sponsors on the show, which is BetterHelp. And a lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. A lot of times we get lost in the sauce and we don't realize what our priorities are or how to prioritize our priorities. We just know that it's around there, it's hanging around, and we need to figure out exactly how to take advantage of it. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, you should give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, and Thursday was the day. Talked about it early on Thursday's show. Was letting you know that later on in the afternoon, I was going to be a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the mock draft that we do each and every year, and it's always a lot of fun, and I've never tried to trade up. I've tried to trade back. Matter of fact, last year, I was able to trade back a couple spots, and I picked up Devin Witherspoon and a couple extra picks, so I thought I did really well. So this year, the goal was, and I said it on Thursday's show, and I'll say it again. I said it all day on Raider Nation Radio 920. The goal is to move up to number 2. There's no doubt about it. I say that I think the Raiders are moving up. Matter of fact, I know there's interest by the Raiders to move up, so I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't at least try to get up to number 2 myself and go get their quarterback in Jaden Daniels. So the negotiations I looked at as I wanted to throw out an offer, and I talked about it on Thursday. You look at, and this is what I asked Daniel Jeremiah. I've played it on the show before. To move up from 13 to 3, he said you got a pick swap with 13 and 3. Okay, cool. First and third in 2025. Okay, cool. And the first in 2026. That was according to Daniel Jeremiah, according to the charts, to go up from 13 to 3. So I knew that, okay, first of all, trying to go get one of the big-time quarterbacks that are there, you're going to have to put a little sugar on top of that. So I knew that. And so it's even more if you're going from 13 to 2. So this was the offer that I put out there, and this is the one I threw out there on Wednesday. Matter of fact, Wednesday night I put this out there, and this one got rejected. A first and third in 2024, a first and third in 2025, and then a first in 26. So that was what I offered originally, and they came back with a counter offer. And the funny thing about it is the counter offer wasn't too bad, and I probably would have accepted it, But he said at the end of the counter offer, well, this will just be the framework. I'm not actually going to accept this offer right now. We'll talk about it later. So that's when I said, okay, well, now you're just trying to get me to go against myself, continue to raise the ante. So I waited. Once the mock draft began, I said, okay, well, don't forget about me. Hit me up when it's time for the number 2 pick, and we'll see what's up, because I really want to get to that number 2 spot. Like, I let it be known I want to get there. Let me know what you want to do. Well, number 2 came, and number 2 went. I was not able to get to number 2 and get Jaden Daniels. And that's the overall belief anyway, that the Raiders aren't going to be able to get to number 2. So 1, 2, and 3 went status quo, right? The Bears took Caleb, Washington took Jaden Daniels, and New England took Drake May. It was just that simple, just like a lot of people believe it's going to be. And then number 4, Minnesota actually traded up to number 4 with the Cardinals, who we know is open for business, and they took J.J. McCarthy. So everything, the way that it's been rolled out and the way it's been talked about in the media and conversations here on the podcast, it all shook out that way. So, okay, I wasn't able to get up to number 2, but it wasn't from lack of effort. I think that my offer was really good. A first and third in 2024, a first and third in 2025, and a first in 26. That's not bad at all. Right? That's not bad. But I also, like I mentioned, wasn't desperate. I tell the story that, when we went to get the wife a new car, we went to a car dealership, and the car that we drove in was good. And so the guy was trying to, juice us up and try to get us to buy some other car and really jack up the price. And I was like, look, man, I'm not desperate. Somebody else that needs a car, like really bad, is going to come in and say, okay, I'll take it at that price. And you can gash them. I'm not desperate. I can get back in the car that we drove here and be comfortable with that. We can get a new car later on. And so we ended up getting a really good deal. Well, it didn't work out. It just didn't work out, and that's okay. But I said on Thursday's show, if I can't move up to number 2, I'd feel really comfortable taking Terrion Arnold, the cornerback from Alabama, Quinyon Mitchell, the cornerback from Toledo, Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle from Texas, the top offensive tackle that's still on the board, or Michael Penix. So I got one of those. I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to tell you who I took. I won't do that right now because, of course, there's going to be a show put together, and I don't want to ruin that. But I will let you know I didn't get to 2. I didn't get to Jaden Daniels, but I did get one of those guys that I just talked about right there. And matter of fact, I'll even eliminate it a little bit more. I'll make it a little bit easier. Arnold, Mitchell, Murphy, or top offensive tackle. That's who I got. I'll let you know right now, a guy that we've talked about quite a bit here on the show, Michael Penix, did not get drafted in the first round. Out of all the picks that we went through the whole first round and a couple in the second round for teams that didn't have first-round picks. Michael Penix did not get selected. So that's been part of the conversation. Okay, can Michael Penix be had in round number 2 or the back end of round number 1? According to the Locked On Podcast Network's mock draft, yes is the answer. So when I looked at it and I looked at the spreadsheet and I even thought about it before I entered my selection, I was like, well, Penix has been one of the guys on my list. Should I go for it or should I not? I said, you know what? I'm going to get an impact player, a guy that can start day one, a guy that I think can go onto the field and really help this team get where they need to go immediately. So that's what I did. And like I said, I'm not going to say who it is right now because I want the show to come out and then we'll be able to talk about it later. But just know it's one of those. Arnold, Mitchell, Murphy, or the top offensive tackle. Penix is still available in round 2. So to me, I felt very comfortable when I saw that, knowing, okay, if the Raiders want him, according to our mock draft, they can do like the Raiders did a season ago, where Dave Ziegler and company traded up to go get Michael Mayer, right? I mean, they tried to trade up to round 1, and then the price got too expensive, so Dave Ziegler said, oh, we'll just waited till round 2, and then traded up. I could see that happening, and maybe the Raiders could still come away with Michael Penix. And if not, you feel comfortable, and this is what I was talking about the insurance when it comes to Gardner Minshew. At least you feel like, okay, he could start some games. You know Aiden O'Connell could start some games, and you've seen him win. So, you know, there's two kind of aces in the hole that the Raiders have where they don't have to feel desperate. They don't have to, you know, just give up everything and listen to every demand that a team has just to go get their guy because they don't feel like they have a guy. They have a guy. They just may not have the guy that's the long-term guy. But they have a guy that can start some games, and they have a guy that can win some games. So the results of the podcast mock draft did not go the way I wanted to. I spent all afternoon, 3 hours on Raider Nation Radio 920, fielding offers from Raider Nation to try to counter. And when it came to number 2, they didn't even hit me back. I was like, hey, I'm here. Let me know. You ready to go? Nothing. And they didn't trade out of that spot, so they ended up just picking the quarterback. So there was no better offer at all. And they might not even really have been serious about any offer at all. But, at the end of the day, I tried. Again, I tried to give up a first and a third in 2024, a first and a third in 2025, and also a first in 2026. And I was willing to negotiate a little bit more if they wanted to negotiate. Problem is, they didn't want to. And that very easily could happen on April 25th or even leading up to the draft. So that's what I got for you. You'll get the results of the mock draft sooner rather than later, but just wanted to kind of update you on exactly where I was when it came to the Locked On Podcast Network mock draft. So coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. That's next here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. And I guarantee there's a bunch of busted brackets based off day one of the NCAA March Madness tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset, which there were upsets, or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Tim G in Virginia, calling to talk about this draft with quarterbacks in comparison to the 83 draft and all the quarterbacks, the great quarterbacks that were in that draft. Here he is, Tim G, calling out of Virginia.
Q, this is Tim G from Virginia. What's up, Raider Nation? Just had a quick question. I was just looking at the draft. Back in 1983 is known as the greatest draft for quarterbacks ever. With all of these quarterbacks in mind, do you think they have the potential to overthrow that 1983 class? Just asking for giggles, not trying to put that much pressure on them. But they had 3 quarterbacks that, if you look at the draft, Elway number 1, Jim Kelly number 14, and Dan Marino number 27. Just want your thoughts on that. Raider Nation, let's go Raiders.
Tim, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. And the 83 draft, man, not only had Hall of Fame quarterbacks, but 8 Hall of Famers total, right? And that was in 12 rounds, but still 8 Hall of Famers from the 83 class. I mean, it's hard to put that kind of expectations on this class and these quarterbacks. It's just built different. But I mean, you got John Elway going number 1. You had Jim Kelly going number 14, Dan Marino number 27. That was just 1, 2, 3. That's 3 quarterbacks right there. Also another Hall of Famer, Eric Dickerson went 2. Tackle Jimbo Covert went 6. Guard Bruce Matthews went 9. Darrell Green, the defensive back, went 28. Defensive end Richard Dent went 203. 8th round he went. He was a Hall of Famer. And I'll say this, Greg Townsend, defensive end Greg Townsend of the Silver and Black, went number 110 overall, 4th round, should be in the Hall of Fame. You get over 100 career sacks, you should be in the Hall of Fame. Greg Townsend is that guy, definitely should be in there. But there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, 8 Hall of Famers and should really be 9 with the addition of Greg Townsend. So I'm not going to put that on these quarterbacks because we just don't know. I feel like you pretty much know that if you get 4 quarterbacks, 5 quarterbacks going round 1, maybe 2 will be really good. Right? You just got to find the right ones. That's the biggest thing. So thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Mike King from Pico Rivero. He says, Q, I really don't see any realistic way of getting Daniels in the draft, but I wouldn't mind getting McCarthy if they can move up to get him. I'm not too high on Penix after watching that championship game against Michigan. It's Mike King from Pico Rivera. Thanks so much for the text. And, yeah, that's what Mel Kiper Jr. was talking about is that national championship game. The fact that Michigan was able to really ruffle the feathers of Penix and he wasn't able to operate the way that he should. And it's true. When he had a clean pocket, he was able to do a lot of great things. He has a really strong arm. He can move the pocket a little bit, but as Mel mentioned, when you get him off of off his spot, a lot of times he's not able to dominate the way that he should. And remember, when he was running and it was a running threat as a quarterback, that's when he got injured in Indiana. So I understand I'm not that high on J.J. McCarthy only because I just don't know. there's so many questions about McCarthy. Like, we just don't know who he is right now. We sure don't know who he's going to be in the NFL. I just find it hard to believe that they're going to put the eggs in the basket of, a quarterback that they actually don't know what he can do. Well, he wasn't asked to do it. I get it. But how do you know he can do it if he is asked to do it? That's my biggest question. So someone's going to do it. According to the Locked On Podcast mock draft, it was the Minnesota Vikings. They traded up to number 4 to go get it done. They had that number 23 overall pick. Of course, they had number 11 as well. They packaged those and got up to number 4, and they got J.J. McCarthy. So, it's possible. Not saying it's not for them. And, you mentioned Jaden Daniels and the fact that it might be very difficult for the Raiders to get him. You're right. It probably is. And if our mock draft is anything like the real draft, then the Raiders won't get him. It's just that simple. But thanks for the text. I appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Raider Adam in Reno. He's calling to talk about the upcoming draft, what he thinks about the quarterback position, what he thinks the Raiders could be doing. Here he is, Raider Adam in Reno.
Hey, Q. This is Raider Adam in Reno. Just want to talk about the draft. As much as I would love for us to get Jaden Daniels, I do not see it happening now, just with the moves that the Commanders and the Bears have made. With that being said, my second option for quarterback is Michael Penix. I remember watching the college football playoff game when Washington played Texas, and he was really impressive. I mean, he was slinging the ball all around the yard. He even showcased his mobility, too, which kind of surprised me. But he just has a rocket arm. He's accurate. And I think he would fit in well with Luke Getsy's offense. And, AP wants that vertical passing game. And I believe with the weapons that we have, I think Michael Penix fits their offense really well. With that being said, it's kind of funny. I've been seeing some mock drafts of, the Raiders or just, in general of Michael Penix going in the second round. And I honestly think that the Raiders should try to trade up to get into like that 5 or 7 range to get our quarterback, because there's so many quarterback needy teams. I mean, besides the top 3 picks with Washington, Chicago, and New England, I mean, you have the Giants, which I can see probably taking a quarterback, the Vikings, the Broncos, and there's another team out there. I think those are the teams, but so that's 6 teams that need quarterbacks that are in front of us. So I just think that it would be smart for us to try to get up to that 5 to 7 range to get Penix. But I would like to hear your thoughts, Hugh, because I'm not sure what the Raiders should do, if they should stay put at 13, trade up, trade back, late into the first round and get a guy like Penix, or just, draft a quarterback like Penix in the second round. Plenty of options on the table. We'd love to hear your thoughts, Hugh, on what the Raiders should do here. But anyways, I love the podcast. Keep doing a great job, Hugh. And go Raiders.
Thanks for the call. I appreciate you. And there's a great chance that the Raiders can't get him. Again, just kind of echoing the same thing that Mike said. You can trade up. You can want to trade up all you want, but if you can't get him, you can't get him. But we won't know until we know. So as far as trading up to 5 to 7 to get Penix, I don't think you need to do that, right? I mean, again, our mock draft, he went the whole first round and didn't make it. So I don't think you need to move up to 5 to 7 to get Penix if that's your guy. You can wait and get him at 13. You could trade back and get him a little bit later. You might be able to trade back into the back end of round 1 after already picking an impact player and get him. I mean, there's so many different options that you have, similar to what you mentioned. Trading up to get Michael Penix, I don't think is something that you have to do. But Raider Adam, thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. How about a text from Mason? Hey, Q. Mason out of MT here. Sending this out on my birthday and figured I'd share my Raiders birthday wish list. This is just for fun, but I think it could happen. I'd love to bring in Trey White to a short 1 or 2 year deal as long as it's cheap. He'd be a great veteran presence for guys like Jack Jones and Hobbs, along with any rookie we may bring in. I think if we can get within 5 to 7 range and get up to 2 to 3 from there. We may not have first-round picks for 2 or 3 seasons, but if you're a franchise guy for 10-plus years, then it doesn't matter. Thanks, Q. Love your work. And your first listen of the day, true voice of Raider Nation, Raiders. That's from Mason, and thanks for the text. I appreciate you. Thanks for the compliment as well, and happy birthday. By the way, I don't know, man. If you trade up to 5 to 7, I find it hard to be able to move up higher, right? I mean, it's just I get what they're doing, but especially with Minnesota, and we all feel like that they're going to try to get up to number 4. If the Raiders get up to 5 to 7 range, but then they can't move any higher, who are they going to get? Are they going to get someone that they really covet, or are they just going to get somebody else and then they gave up a bunch of draft capital like that? I'd be very hesitant to do that, only because I don't know who they would get besides Jaden Daniels if they get up to that range. That's my biggest issue. You don't want to trade up, give up capital, and then get a guy that you could have waited at 13 to get. Like, that's the last thing you want to do. That would feel like a fail, right? That would be the one thing that makes you angry when you wake up on Sunday, April 28th. You're like, wait a minute, hold on. The Raiders just finished the draft, didn't get a franchise quarterback, or they did, but they gave up a lot to go up to get him, and it wasn't even the guy that they initially wanted, right? So that would be my issue. But thanks for the text. I do appreciate you. We'll see how it shakes out. Got a call from Sucker Free Raider. It's a quick one. He's calling to talk about quarterback gate, a little bit of conspiracy theory that he's got going on. It's a quick one, but it's a good one. Here he is, Sucker Free Raider.
Hey, Q, what's up, man? Sucker Free Raider. I'm calling about QB gate. Yeah, the conspiracy theory 2.0. I called in not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, about saying let's have some fun and seeing AP on Madden and stuff like that. And then I was also talking about Harbaugh wanting us to pick, McCarthy or something. But, man, after listening to Kiper Jr., or as you say it, Mel Kiper Jr., after hearing him talk about Penix and talking about the last game, that he played, it was like, wow, that's the other person, that's the other quarterback that Harbaugh would love us to get, because he knows how to shut him down. Wow. Go Raiders.
Thanks for the call. And yeah, I mean, Harbaugh, yeah, I mean, he can feel like he can shut Penix down, right? But does he have that defense that he had at Michigan? I mean, that Michigan defense and that team in general has got 22 guys that entered the draft. They'll have a bunch of guys that are going to compete with Alabama for the most guys drafted this upcoming draft. So, yeah, I mean, he can know all he wants to know about Penix, but unless he has those bloodthirsty Pirates that he had at Michigan to try to shut him down, I think that he'll be okay, right? I still like your conspiracy theory when it comes to J.J. McCarthy. That would be a good one because he spent so much time with them, but he didn't really spend that much time with Michael Penix. He just spent time, preparing for him for that national championship game. But that's a good one. I like it. Good stuff. Finally, we close out with a text from Peter in Winnipeg. Hey, Q, longtime listener, first time texting in. It's Peter from Winnipeg. On yesterday's show, you were talking about the possibility of taking Penix at 13. If he's the guy for them, I say pull the trigger and do it. We know the Raiders have needs at corner and right tackle, and this is a deep draft for both. Why not make a trade to get in the end of the first round or top second round so they have the ability to fill both needs? I'm sure it wouldn't take a huge haul, maybe a later round pick this year and a second next year. Just a thought. Go Raiders. That's Peter in Winnipeg. And yeah, sure. That you can do that. There's no doubt you can do that, right? That's been brought up a couple times that you can go and get the quarterback and then later on trade up to pick up the cornerback or the offensive tackle. I don't know. I feel like if you're not going to get the actual quarterback that you want, which I think is Jaden Daniels and probably Jaden Daniels only, and Michael Penix will be like a fallback. If you can get that impact player at 13, that's probably what they'll want to do. But, again, you could be right. There's many different ways to get where you're trying to get. Right. I mean, and Antonio Pierce has mentioned that before. Hey, there's not just one way to get it done. So that could potentially be a way that they're looking at. Like, okay, get the quarterback here, and then we'll go back and get that top-notch cornerback or that top-flight offensive tackle, the guy that could really hold down that right tackle spot. So that's definitely a theory. It's definitely a thought. We just don't know exactly how it's going to shake out. But that's going to do it for today's show. Thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. That's all I got time for. Coming up on Monday, we'll see what the rest of today and the weekend brings us. But we'll be back here, of course, talking all things Raiders football. We'll have more calls and texts. We got Pee Weezy in Houston. He hit us up on the text line. We'll get that in. We'll get our calls in. We'll have more news and notes, of course, collected over the weekend. And we'll have plenty of conversation as we get closer and closer and closer to the draft in Detroit starting on April 25th. Until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.